absolute honor and privilege to welcome you all to the inaugural session of the 2 days national training seminar on transforming rural livelihood landscape in India, challenges and pathways, jointly organized by the Madhya Pradesh Institute of Social Science Research and the Institute of Livelihood Research and Training, Bhopal. We are gathered here today to deliberate on one of the most pressing issues of our time, the transformation of rural livelihoods to build a sustainable, inclusive and prosperous India. This seminar brings together some of the most eminent minds and practitioners in the field of rural development, policy planning and social entrepreneurship. To begin with, let us extend a warm welcome to our esteemed dignitaries who have graced us with their presence today. Chairing the session, Professor Gopal Krishna Sharma, President, MPISSR Ujjain. Chief guest, Shri Raman Wadhwa, Director, Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana, National Rural Livelihood Mission, Ministry of Rural Development, Government of India. Keynote speaker for today's session, Shri Vijay Mahajan, CEO of the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation, Director of the Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Contemporary Studies and founder of the Basics and Pradhan. Convener of the seminar and Director of MPISSR Ujjain, Professor Yatendra Singh Sisodia. Coordinator of the seminar, Dr. Rajendra Singh Gautam, Dean, Institute of Livelihood Research and Training, Bhopal. On the dais, to kindly come forward for the lighting of the ceremonial lamp in front of Ma Saraswati, the goddess of wisdom and knowledge. Please give a big round of applause.
Of the National Seminar on Transforming Rural Livelihood Landscape in India, Challenges and Pathways, organized jointly by MPISSR and ILRT. We are indeed fortunate that we have President of the Institute, Professor Gopal Krishna Sharma, to chair this inaugural session. We have Sri Raman Wadhwa ji as our chief guest in this inaugural session, and we have Sri Vijay Mahajan ji as keynote speaker, Dr. Rajan, coordinator of the seminar, and Sri Sumit, co-coordinator of the seminar, and the distinguished gathering of the dais. We are extremely privileged to have two very prominent individuals on the dais. One who is in the government dealing with the National Rural Livelihood Mission. So who else can be better than Sri Wadhwa ji to inaugurate this seminar, who is going to give us the perspective of the government. And we are extremely privileged to have Sri Vijay Mahajan ji, a man who is internationally recognized rural development professional, and he has spent his entire life on dealing with the issues of rural India and livelihood. So we are extremely privileged to have both on the dais to inaugurate this seminar. In fact, We have also planned this seminar in such a way with ILRT that we are going to have a very distinguished panel for the panel discussion immediate after this inaugural. And we have panelists. The chair of the panel will be Professor Somnath Ghoshji. Then we have panelists Professor S.V. Reddy, Ms. Mansi Shah, Mr. Pranab Ranjan Chaudhary, Dr. Anuradha Pugat and Dr. Ajit Fadnis. I also welcome all the panelists at MPISSR Ujjain. To the invitation extended to some prominent individuals and who have also joined this inaugural session, I also warmly welcome Dr. K. Girishan, Professor Meena Ketan, Professor M. Surimani, Dr. Rahul Banerjee, Professor Rekha Acharya, Dr. Nita Tapan and Dr. V.S. Vibhuti. And we have a very important assembly here representing 14 states. And when we were planning this seminar, why we are together, why MPISSR and ILRT have come together? Because in the last 30 plus years journey of MPISSR, rural livelihood is one of the core areas on which we have been working continuously. And this was a kind of opportunity for us to engage with the policy planners, practitioners and academicians, and therefore this particular seminar has come into at this stage. And we all know that rural livelihood is very important and crucial issue in the policy debate in the present context, and the kind of rapid changes which are taking place in rural India, and we are also aware that the rural employment spectrum continues to be predominantly agrarian, and we are also aware that this rural sector is majorly rigid and less dynamic, and therefore there is a need of some rural economic diversification. There is a need to have livelihood diversification, and keeping that in view, the entire concept note was developed, and we know that there are two very important schemes of the government. One is NRLM and another is MGNREGS. Both have been able to immensely contribute to the rural livelihood, and that will also be very important issue of discussion in the coming 2 days. And we also aware that application-based technology can be very crucial and important in terms of the rural livelihood opportunities, and we require evidence-based approach, and the most important thing is to have a deeper understanding of last mile requirement. I think we are also engaged with the rural development issues for the last 3+ decades, and this last mile requirement is one of the very important and crucial issues which in all probability we are going to have threadbare discussion during this seminar. And the kind of august gathering we have in this seminar, I am of the firm view that we are really going to unravel the entire gamut of the rural livelihood scenario. And I hope and believe that we will have a very fruitful discussion which can be in a position to yield some tangible output in terms of policy input to the government and to the development sector. So I once again welcome all of you, and I also urge all of you to remain with us for the panel discussion which will take place here in the auditorium hall immediate after the inaugural function. So I once again welcome all of you at MPISSR. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your heartfelt words of welcome and for setting the tone for this seminar. Now, I invite Dr. Rajesh Singh Gautam to provide a brief introduction to the seminar and its objectives. So, thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of both the institutions, I welcome you in this national seminar on transforming rural livelihood landscape in India, challenges and pathways. Friends, as we know that India with a population of 1.4 billion people and the workforce participation rate of 56%, the country is facing unique challenge in terms of promoting sustainable livelihoods. As we know that about 2/3 population of our country is residing in rural area, and they are depending on agriculture and allied sectors for their livelihood. As we know that the farm sector is facing multiple challenges and the opportunities are limited. Similarly, the employment opportunities in the rural area is also limited because of limited development of non-farm sector. Then there are geographical challenges. So there are hilly areas and there are rain-fed areas which are facing the challenges of environmental degradation and climate change. So the deprivation of the marginalized section is taking place very fast. On the other hand, the economy, India is one of the fastest growing economy in the world. And because of this globalization, the integration of rural economy is taking place fast with the global markets. So technological innovations are taking place, startups are coming in the farm and non-farm sector both. And we have a huge number of youth population in our country available for joining the workforce. So India is facing two challenges. On the one hand, we are struggling for ensuring the livelihood security of the mass, and on the other hand, we have opportunities. So then there is a challenge before the policymakers, planners, researchers and practitioners, how to address the various challenges the rural communities are facing. And these challenges are related to sectors, segments, spatial challenges, and then how we can actually ensure that the kind of technological development and innovations are taking place can be leveraged for promoting inclusive and sustainable livelihoods. So focusing on all these issues, we have planned this seminar so that it can help to address these issues. So there will be 4 focus areas in this seminar. First is sectoral challenges. So what are the challenges of agriculture and allied sector, rural manufacturing and service sectors, and what are the pathways through which we can promote the livelihoods of those who are associating in these sectors. Then there are segmental issues. So understanding the segmental issues, especially the issues of women, the tribal and people who are living in the pockets of poverty, and how we can actually address their livelihood challenges. The third one is spatial challenges. So investigating the issues which are specifically related to the hilly regions, the drought prone regions, or the regions which are affected by climate change, and what are the pathways to actually address the challenges of the communities living in this area. Then India's economy and the technological development is taking place very fast. So what can be the suitable strategies and through which we can leverage this advantage to address our disadvantageous issues. So these are the 4 focus areas of this seminar which we will be focusing on. And once again, I thank you all for your interest in this subject and participation in this seminar. I hope that during this seminar we will be able to understand all the different issues in detail, and we will be able to find out the pathways and the strategies and what could be the suitable way forward through which we can actually address these challenges, and particularly of the marginal communities of our country. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing an insightful overview of the seminar's theme and its significance in today's context. It is now time to hear from our distinguished keynote speaker. Before inviting him to the podium, let me take a moment to share a brief of his illustrious profile. Mr. Vijay Mahajan is a renowned Indian rural development professional, social entrepreneur, and policy analyst. He founded organizations such as the Basics Social Enterprise Group and the Pradhan NGO. Over the years, he has contributed to key committees, including the Rangarajan Committee on Financial Inclusion and the Raghuram Rajan Committee on Financial Sector Reforms. An accomplished scholar, he has authored over 70 papers and articles and contributed chapters to 15 academic books on rural development, microfinance, and social innovation. An alumnus of IIT Delhi, IIM Ahmedabad, and a mid-career fellow at Princeton University, Mr. Mahajan's work continues to shape impactful policies and initiatives in rural development. With great pleasure, I now invite Mr. Vijay Mahajan sir to deliver the keynote address. Sir.
Thank you, Sumit. Respected Professor Sharma, Professor Sushodia, Director of the Institute, Raman, Mr. Raman Madhva, Director of the National Rural Livelihood Mission, my colleague Dr. Rajen Singh Gautam, Director of the ILRT, and so distinguished participants and paper writers, others who are present. It's really, this is my first visit to this institute, and I'm very privileged to be here, particularly in the presence of Dr. Sharma and Professor Susodia. I spent the last half hour in Professor Susodia's room and very quickly looked at some of the older issues of the journal from way back from 2010, and I'm delighted to see that, the Institute continues to produce steady empirical research of relevance both to Madhya Pradesh, but indeed more widely to the social science understanding of India. That is very essential. In fact, the whole idea of setting up the ICSSR institutions was to create a kind of a continuous observatory of the Indian scene and an ongoing analysis and understanding of this transforming society. Because while we've, of course, had the CSIR for the science and technology side of things, the ICMR for the medical side, but the fact that the founding fathers of India thought of the ICSSR also shows that we wanted to have a holistic view of society and duly informed by thinking and research in the social sciences, so that we could evolve a more balanced view of the world. Unfortunately, over the last 20-30 years, and I say this despite myself being a techie, the tech world and its friend, the capital world, have joined and become rather very overweening presence in the world of knowledge also, as if tech के अलावा कोई और विद्या ही नहीं है. We reached that point. But the fact is that a nation which only thinks that technology is knowledge will regret to see that it does not know how to manage itself. And we are already seeing signs of that. And therefore, I applaud the fact that institutes like this continue, despite the fact that they are not fashionable today. But that's fine. Fashion aate hain, jaate hain. I also want to commend you for inviting the ILRT to be your co-organizer for this national seminar. As you know, ILRT is a very empirical, field-based institute, not in the same academic tradition as the ISSR institutions, but much more empirical, much more practice-based, and it's really aimed at practitioners. And that's because we felt, I mean, all my life I've basically been a practitioner, but I feel that an ounce of theory is equal to a ton of practice, and therefore it's very important that practice be informed with the best that the academic world, the research world, the world of theory has to offer. But at the same time, we can't stop in seminar rooms. We have to take all this knowledge into the field, and that's where practitioners are important. And therefore, just as an ounce of theory is worth a ton of practice, even a ton of theory is of no use unless it is put into practice. So I have spent my life basically trying to establish this iterative linkage, what is called praxis, basically the interaction between theory and action, and then using the lessons from action to rebuild or improve theory. So, coming to the topic today, transforming rural livelihood landscapes in India, the challenges and pathways. So first of all, though I got this only after coming here, but I was quickly browsing through the abstracts of various papers, and I must commend the organizers as well as the paper writers for a very broad sweep of the challenges and hints about some of the pathways. Many of these papers are dealing with relatively new things, and therefore naturally there is not enough of a depth in terms of time or multiple cases to study, but the ideas are there, and there are papers here dealing with climate change, there are papers here dealing with the digital opportunities, there are papers here with respect to, for example, there's a paper titled, and I believe Dr. Padnish will be in the discussion immediately after this, as to why do rural policies fail and how to make them succeed. The second half is indeed very endearing to me, because the world of literature surveys is full of why do rural policies fail, but if somebody is daring to suggest how to make them succeed, I think it's very, very important. And that's very courageous, and I applaud it. So let me, in that spirit, first of all, lay out for you what I think are the challenges. First of all, it was stated that livelihoods is a major challenge of our times. It is true, as you know, whether we go by statistics, we go by the labor force participation rates, aggregate as well as for females, if we go by the unemployment rate, all these numbers are at historic workforce participation rate for females is at historic low, unemployment rates, particularly for youth, are at a historic high. And this is despite the fact that though starting 2017, India also adopted the international method of measuring the labor force, which is the by conducting periodic labor force surveys, PLFS. But we have diverged from international standards, from ILO standards in one respect, which is very critical, sir. People who are working within the household and not doing domestic work, but any enterprise work, internationally they are not treated as. May I just request people to put their mobile phone on silent, please? Yeah. People who are working inside their home, but for not domestic duties, if they are paid internationally, they are treated as employed. But in India, we have adopted this concept that even if you are unpaid family labor in a household enterprise, you are treated as employed. And just to give you what difference that makes, the most recent PLFS data, the annual report 23-24, 58.4% of India's workforce was self-employed. Of this, fully 18%, 17.8%, was unpaid household workers, mostly women. Had we followed the international definition, these 18% would not have been treated as employed. But we treat them as employed, and that significantly reduces the unemployment rate as well as increases the whole concept of labor force. Nevertheless, what is to be remembered is that till a couple of years ago, the female labor force participation rate had reached below 20%. 1 in 5. This is in the decade, 2 decades following a period when India has seen the historic growth in secondary enrollment for girls. So जैसे जैसे लड़कियां ज़्यादा पढ़ाई कर रही हैं, in fact they are not participating in the labor force. What does that show? Of course, partly it shows that the social situation is such that it doesn't allow them to work, but also because there is already such a huge number of male work seekers that it's assumed that there is no work, so you are not in the labor force, and therefore, because you're not in the labor force, there's no question of your being in the workforce, so the unemployment rate automatically comes down because the labor force is the denominator. So to go beyond all these technicalities, there's one number that I request you to look at, which interestingly does not come from the PLFS. It comes from a different survey that the government's own National Sample Survey Organization conducts for the last 4 years. It's called CAMS, the Comprehensive Annual Modular Survey. It's a very simple 24-question survey. But one of the things it asks is, are you NEET? NEET is not in employment, education or training. मतलब आप कुछ कर भी नहीं रहे हैं, चाहे नौकरी हो या घर पे, in terms of employment, ना आप पढ़ रहे हैं, ना आप किसी प्रशिक्षण पे जा रहे हैं, तो फिर आप क्या कर रहे हैं? मतलब बेसिकली बैठे हैं, कुछ ढूंढ रहे हैं. So the NEET percent for people between age 15 to 29, as per the last CAMS for 23-24, was 24.5. Yani 1 in 4 of our young people, and India is a nation of the young, median age is 29. 1 in 4 of our young people are not, 3 in 4 are not in education employment training. So, इसका क्या मतलब है? That the economy is not generating enough livelihood. That we seem to have locked ourselves into a economic model where no doubt there is growth of the GDP. No doubt there is massive increases in some macroeconomic aggregates. But in terms of its redistribution, it's very, very problematic. And that's why we have this phenomenon of massively increasing inequalities in India, which there are enough reports, the Oxfam report, the rising Gini ratios, all of that show that we are now locked into a very unequal thing. सो इसको हम वो जो 3 फिल्टर्स हैं, सेक्टोरल, सेगमेंटल एंड स्पेशियल, अगर उससे देखें तो सेक्टोरली द लार्जेस्ट नंबर ऑफ इंडियंस are working in agriculture, about 45% of our workforce. तो उनका क्या हालत है? As we know, 86% of our India's land agricultural households are marginal, below 2.5 acres. बाकी जो 14% है उसमें करीब 10% जो है वो small है. Only 4% of India's farmers have 1 hectare or more farm households. So the viability of an agricultural holding is, already very doubtful because of the land-man ratios, because of the small size of the agricultural holding and fragmentation within that. And therefore, we have to, as a nation, as not just as agricultural people, Dr. Reddy is here, but also as social scientists, we have to help the Indian agricultural sector, the Indian farmers, to come out of this dilemma that आप केवल नाम के वास्ते किसान रह गए. If you look at the time use survey of agricultural households, farm households are doing anything but farming. If you look at their income, in some cases less than 10% of the income is coming from agriculture, but they call themselves agricultural households. That is their identity. So, and way back in 2004-05, when a farmer survey was done by the NSS, one of the questions was, if you were to discontinue farming, would you like to continue in farming? And 40% had said no. This is 2004-05. उसके बाद वो प्रश्न पूछा ही नहीं गया. लेकिन आज की तारीख में शायद 60-70% होंगे. तो, this love for agriculture is actually love for land. And love for land is in the hope कि चलो 1 एकड़ है, किसी दिन तो बिकेगी, तो बहुत पैसा मिलेगा. और बहुत उदाहरण है इसके. कहीं हाईवे आ गई, अरे अपनी भी जिंदगी एक्सप्रेसवे बन गई है, करोड़ रुपया मिल जाएगा. तो we have to facilitate transition in agriculture. We should facilitate something which delinks ownership, the title on land, from its utilization. तो अगर मैं इस भूमि का अधिकारी हूं तो वो अनक्वेश्चन रहे, लेकिन उस भूमि को कल कुछ दूसरा इस्तेमाल करना है तो उसका जितना भी यूसुफ्रुक्स है, अगर सेल होगा तो सेल वैल्यू, अगर रेवेन्यू आता है तो शेयर ऑफ द रेवेन्यू इन अ फेयर वे शुड बिलोंग टू द भूमि स्वामी. चाहे वहां पे एक्सप्रेसवे बने, चाहे वहां इंडस्ट्री बने, चाहे वहां पे कोई बड़ा किसान आके खेती करे, चाहे वहां पे कोई जो भी है उसका जो भी मुनाफा होगा उसका एक फेयर शेयर should go to the landowner. What this will do is remove this maya कि 45% of Indian labor force is dependent on agriculture. ये सही नहीं है, ये statistical माया है. The fact is only about 10% of the 9 crore farm households are truly agriculturists. And they are the ones who are producing the surplus. The rest are actually not even surplus agriculture producers. They are buying food grains, and therefore their interest lies in, the lower the prices, the better it is. So ये जितना भी MSP वगैरह का होता है, as you can see, it is from the surplus producing areas, mainly Punjab, Haryana, Western UP. and mainly for wheat and rice, जिसका के 90% procurement उन्हीं चीज़ों का होता है. So इसके अलावा we have to release Indian agriculture from the priorities that we had established for it very rightly. 65-66 में बिहार famine हुआ था. 66-67 में President Johnson was holding a gun on our head कि हमारी policies मानोगे तो आपको गेहूं मिलेगा. So India opted for an accelerated green revolution. By 1970 we had crossed 100 million tons of production. बहुत अच्छी बात. लेकिन उसकी जो underlying assumptions थे, irrigation intensity, chemical intensity, certain degree of support both on input side and output side, that has become an addiction. To the point where today, we are, for example, जब हम rice export करते हैं, तो actually we are exporting lakhs of liters of water. That's what we are doing. जब हम sugar export करते हैं, we are exporting for every ton of sugar lakhs of liters of water. So we have to liberate Indian agriculture from this and focus on what was our natural comparative advantage, which includes coarse cereals, millets, includes, of course, pulses and oil seeds, and all the other variety for which India was known. पूरी दुनिया यहाँ आती थी for our spices, and so forth. So Indian agriculture needs to be released from this wheat, rice, cotton and sugar cane, these 4 crops का जो एक चक्र चल गया है. We have to be released from this and we have to liberate Indian agriculture to respond to the fact that we live in a subcontinent where the soil, the rainfall, the solar radiation and the biodiversity, 4 God-given resources, are incomparable to anywhere else in the world. There is no other landmass जिसके ऊपर हर साल वर्षा होती है इतनी सारी. There is no other landmass which gets 320 days a year of solar radiation. There is no other landmass which has this much biodiversity or this level of soil quality. So we can be the breadbasket for the world, provided we get over this political economy lock that we put on ourselves. कि नहीं हम तो बस अब पंजाब में आप चावल पैदा कर रहे हैं और वो भी जमीन को सोख के और फिर हर साल और केमिकल डाल रहे हैं. Your soil is dead, your microbial life is gone, micronutrients are gone. Plus ना किसान खुश है, ना सरकार खुश है, ना कंज्यूमर खुश है. It's time we had a national debate. This is not a political problem, sir. This is not a BJP or Akali Dal or Congress problem. This is a national problem. We have to all sit and solve it, And the role of social scientists, agricultural scientists, economists is to draw attention to the fact that unless we solve it as a national problem, we are all going to suffer more badly. Let me move on from agriculture to give a counter-intuitive recommendation. Normally, किसी भी इकोनॉमिस्ट से आप बात करिए तो वो बोलते हैं भाई when an economy grows, the share of the primary sector, particularly agriculture sector, in the GDP comes down. इंडिया में भी कहाँ 40-45% था, अब जीडीपी का शेयर एग्रीकल्चर सिर्फ 14-15% हो गया. और इसकी जगह मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेकेंडरी सेक्टर जो है मैन्युफैक्चरिंग, कंस्ट्रक्शन, यूटिलिटीज एंड टर्शरी सेक्टर, सर्विसेज ऑफ ऑल काइंड्स, उसका जीडीपी शेयर बढ़ता है. लेकिन this may be the historical truth for certain industrialized countries. It doesn't mean that this is how it is meant to be for every nation. As it is, India has breached in one way that our services sector has already grown far higher than our manufacturing sector. In fact, this is the first year when, believe it or not, our services exports are higher than our merchandise exports. First year in our history. उसमें mainly software वगैरह है, but अभी services की काफी diversity हो गई. But so if that breach is acceptable to us, why not the other breach, which is कि अगर हमारे 45% of our workforce today in 2025 are engaged in the rural agriculture sector, why can't we enhance the GDP share of that? तो सिर्फ विजय महाजन के कहने से हो जाएगा? नहीं होगा. GDP share will go up if productivity goes up. Productivity in agriculture will go up provided we restore the natural sources of productivity. अभी तक केमिकल्स डाल के इरिगेशन कर के प्रोडक्टिविटी बढ़ा रहे थे. वी हैव टू रिस्टोर इट बाय गोइंग बैक टू मोर बैलेंस फार्मिंग. आई एम नॉट आर्ग्यूइंग फॉर 100% ऑर्गेनिक. आई एम नॉट even arguing for 100% chemical free. But what Dr. Reddy in the morning conversation called Bharat agriculture model, I think we need to have something which is more balanced. And उसके लिए सर आई मेंटेन दैट हम लोगों ने अपने जल जंगल जमीन जिसका इतना दोहन किया है पिछले 100 साल में कि उसमें जब तक हम दोबारा इन्वेस्ट नहीं करेंगे तब तक एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर, एनिमल हस्बेंड्री सेक्टर, फॉरेस्ट्री, फिशरी सेक्टर, इनकी प्रोडक्टिविटी लॉन्ग टर्म पे बढ़ ही नहीं सकती. और जल जंगल जमीन में अगर हमें इन्वेस्ट करना है, आई हैव अ सेपरेट पेपर ऑन व्हिच आई हैव डन वेरी डिटेल्ड कैलकुलेशंस, बट टॉप लाइन में आपको बता रहा हूं, ऑल आवर रिवर बेसिन्स आर इन अ बैड शेप. We need to restore our major rivers. We have to start with their watersheds, their upper catchments. और सबसे बड़ी नदियां हमारी हिमालय से आ रही हैं. एंड ड्यू टू ग्लोबल वार्मिंग ग्लेशियल मेल्ट हो रहे हैं. तो वो नदियों का जो हालचाल होने वाला है कुछ ही साल में, दैट इज already you can see the effects. In the meantime, you are seeing what we saw in Uttarakhand and Sikkim कि ग्लेशियल मेल्ट से पहले लेक बन जाती है, 4-5 साल वो भरती रहती है, then one day it floods, overflows, globs जिसको बोलते हैं, glacial lake overflow floods. But once that is over and the glacial is melted, there is no river. So we have to start investing in our water resources. Similarly, for the first time, 23 में, we had a national census of water bodies. 24 लाख water bodies निकली गिनती की. In a country where there are 6 lakh villages and at least 6,000 major towns, only 24 lakh water bodies, and this is, they've gone down to water bodies below 1 hectare size, छोटे छोटे ponds, पूरा सेंसस है. तो और उसमें भी 80% are encroached, damaged, or other types of pollution in the water. So उन सब में हमें रिस्टोर करना पड़ेगा. जंगल में आइए, अभी लेटेस्ट ISFR इंडियन State of India's Forest Report. खुशी की बात है कि ग्रीन एरिया बढ़ गया है, बट ग्रीन एरिया में अब नॉन फॉरेस्ट ग्रीन एरिया को भी लिया जाता है। ठीक है, जो ओरिजिनल जो फॉरेस्ट था उसमें अगर आप स्टडी करें तो जो डेंस फॉरेस्ट थे वो कम होते जा रहे हैं, मीडियम डेंस फॉरेस्ट जो है वो स्क्रब्स बन रहे हैं, और उससे भी नीचे जो ओपन फॉरेस्ट थे वो बिल्कुल डिन्यूटेड हो रहे हैं। और उसके कारण वी आर facing all the other problems of, high runoff after rainfall, soil erosion, reduction in humus content in agriculture soils, reduction in biodiversity. ये सब जो है जंगलों के कारण हो रहा है। एंड थर्ड, जल जंगल जमीन में, हाँ जमीन पे आइए, हमारा टोटल लैंड मास 320 मिलियन हेक्टेयर है, उसमें से रफली 100 मिलियन हेक्टेयर जो है is degraded in one way or the other. Either there is physical degradation, soil erosion, or chemical degradation, and so on. And this is, I'm talking about treatable. I'm not talking about some Himalayan wasteland like Ladakh or Thar desert. I'm talking about treatable wasteland, 100 million hectare है सर। तो अगर हम जल जंगल जमीन में अगले 10 साल तक अपने जीडीपी का केवल 3%, which is close to about by already 300 लाख करोड़ तो हो ही गया, तो it will be little almost on an average 10 lakh crores per year if we spend for the next 10 years, भारत की जल जंगल जमीन का पुनरुत्थान हो जाएगा, और उससे भारत की कृषि, भारत की वानिकी, भारत का पशुपालन और भारत की बायोडाइवर्सिटी सब रिस्टोर हो जाएंगे, और द नीड फॉर क्रिएटिंग रूरल लाइवलीहुड्स और पलायन will vanish, because there is so much work. I have calculated in detail for a paper I wrote before the Baku COP29. This, if we follow this policy, it will generate 8.5 crore jobs per annum on a temporary basis. And then, because of enhanced productivity of Jal Jangal Zameen, about 5.5 crore jobs every year thereafter on a steady state basis. तो आपकी तो अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व ही हो गई, और स्थानीय जहां पे लोग रहते हैं वहां पे हुई। So, last point I want to make. इसका मतलब ये है कि मैं ये कह रहा हूं कि we should revert to, मतलब सब वानप्रस्थ हो जाएं, नहीं, मैं ये नहीं कह रहा। There are other opportunities, but those require investment in the other capital which we have neglected. We have neglected natural capital, but the other capital is human capital and social capital. हमने, ठीक है, एनरोलमेंट रेट्स 100% के आसपास पहुंच गए हैं सब जगह, प्राइमरी सेकेंडरी भी काफी बढ़ गए हैं, इवन हायर एजुकेशन नंबर्स आर वेरी इंप्रेसिव, लेकिन क्वालिटी इज अ सीरियस इशू. If you want to convince yourself, just look at the ILRT, the annual survey that Pratham does. 5वीं क्लास के 40% बच्चे दूसरी क्लास का अध्याय नहीं पढ़ सकते, गिनती या गुणा भाग नहीं कर सकते, तो उस तरह के एनरोलमेंट का क्या फायदा? But we have to invest this human resource so that they can actually catch up. And interestingly, the same CAMS data that I told you, उसमें एक प्रश्न ये पूछा जाता है कि आपके पास मोबाइल फोन है जिसमें सिम एक्टिव है और जो आप खुद इस्तेमाल करते हैं? बहुत केयरफुल क्वेश्चन है, और इसका जवाब हाँ में is in the 90s, more than 90%. Even for women it is 86%. Another question, आपका बैंक अकाउंट है? Again the numbers are in the high 70s, even for women. एक क्वेश्चन है, आपने कभी ईमेल भेजा है या अटैचमेंट भेजा है या इंटरनेट ब्राउज किया है? आंसर इज 26%। मतलब लोग अपने आप सीख रहे हैं, उसके लिए कोई शाला नहीं है। So the ability of Indian human resources to self-educate is high. Let's make good use of that and give them on-site digital opportunities, जो कि गांव में बैठ के आप मॉडर्न काम कर सकते हैं। आजकल हर गांव में मोबाइल सिग्नल है, डेटा है, the internet is your universe. Why do we have to come physically? वो जमाना गया जब you have to come physically to make a phone call to the GPU. Right? So the digital work needs to be. There is no reason, for example, why people who are sitting in Bangalore's IT city, 90% of them are doing relatively unskilled work. जो सॉफ्टवेयर प्रोग्रामिंग हो तो एआई ले जाएगा, बाकी जो कॉल सेंटर का काम है या ट्रांसक्रिप्शन का काम है वो घर बैठे गांव से भी हो सकता है, बल्कि ज्यादा अच्छा हो सकता है। तो and I noticed that there are a couple of papers which talk about these digital opportunities. I look forward to listening to them. But my vision for rural livelihood transformation in summary is only two, sir. Invest in natural resources and invest in human resources so that India's rural wealth comes out of nature, jal jangal zameen, and out of digital opportunities which may be anywhere in the globe, not necessarily in the Gulf. Thank you so much.